Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, in audio format wherever you get your podcasts, and even in video on YouTube, TikTok, Reels, wherever you get your social media, you can find us there. Today, we have a hotly anticipated film, not just for film critics, but I feel like I've been seeing a pretty decent amount of buzz for this film for a while, and that's Luca Guadagnino's Challengers, starring Zendaya, Mike Feist, and Josh O'Connor. This is, at least in my memory, the first Zendaya-led film that really feels like an adult project. She's kind of talked about this a little bit in the fact that this is a role that sees her playing an older age, playing a mother at one point, playing something that she hasn't experienced. And so going into this, I was really curious, first and foremost, to kind of see that. Obviously, I'm a fan of her on Euphoria and different projects she's done. She was great, especially in Dune Part 2 recently, but it feels like we've kind of been waiting for her to take on a role a little bit older than we know that she can play. She often kind of gets pigeonholed or typecast as a younger character. So I could tell you it was very refreshing to see her take this role on, playing multiple years of this character, but really watching how she evolves that character. So to get into it, Challengers is about Zendaya's character, Tashi Duncan. She's a young 18, 19-year-old tennis superstar who, she's going to get a sponsorship deal. She's going to be the hottest thing since sliced bread. Think like a Williams sister. A lot of attention on her. And inversely, you've also got these two guys, Patrick Zwig, who's played by Josh O'Connor, and Art Donaldson, played by Mike Feist. These two guys have kind of grown up together for years in a boarding school, learning to play tennis with one another. They kind of have a doubles duo, call them Fire and Ice, but they also both play individually. So one weekend during a long tournament, they get to watch Tashi play. They end up at a party with her. Both guys are definitely into her, and Tashi's definitely into both guys. And what starts there, as they're 18 or so, is a really long and complicated, decades spanning love triangle that is not just the love triangle of, oh, she loves him and oh, she also loves him. From very early on, you get the sense that yes, Patrick and Art are very good friends, very close. How close, you might ask? Well, that is something I think Luca Guadagnino, as the director, really does a great job of handling in terms of the story and just not outright saying, like, oh, these two guys are gay or oh, they're bisexual. I don't think they know what they are. And neither does Zendaya's character Tashi. But what we do know is they all share a passion for a sport that demands a lot. They have a drive that's kind of brought out of one another, this kind of competitive spirit that's very interesting. And before you know it, you're kind of watching something where, at first you're kind of like, is anybody else seeing this? So it was like, that little hand grab on the thigh there. I'm like, wasn't that just friendly or was that an excited hand grab? There's just many moments very early on where it's like, okay, these guys are very close. I don't know if they necessarily know how close they are, but they really do bring something great out of one another. And so over the course of time, you kind of follow their careers. You don't necessarily follow the careers explicitly. The film kind of does a little Pulp Fiction, jumping around between timelines, kind of moving to the future, and then going back to kind of inform what's happening then. I thought the structure of kind of how they handled it was pretty good because they set you up for certain expectations, and then you dial it back a few years, and you're like, oh shoot, okay, well there's more of the story that's starting to unravel. The story written by Justin Kurtz Kurtzkis. I'm totally botching that pronunciation. This is pretty much his first feature film that he's written for. And I just learned, thanks to the internet and thanks to Twitter the other day, that he is the husband of Celine Song, who just had her debut film, Past Lives, last year. Both films dealing with love, attraction, nature and nurture, this idea that maybe you can love more than one person, or you can find connection with more than one person. I've seen a lot of jokes about, like, I don't know what goes on in their household, but I'm like, these are two really emotional and really mature scripts, and I think ways that they've kind of handled relationships that maybe look different in the 21st century than maybe what most people are used to. And with Challengers, something I admire about Guadagnino's other works, um, whether or not you've got characters who are gay, who are bisexual, whatever it is, there's not some sticker that they're wearing or some label that needs to be thrown on them to let you know as the audience, like, oh, well, this guy's only this. Rather than that, they actually let the characters be real people. They let them have real lives that are complicated and messy and wonderful, and it just works so well. And I think it's something that Guadagnino brought to Call Me By Your Name with Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer. Bones and All has just some really wonderful and tender moments. Uh, you know, Odd subject matter perhaps, but you can tell that Guadagnino has a real reverence for filmmaking, for the beauty of film, what you were able to kind of convey, not just through words, but through imagery and through how people hold each other, or how people might touch one another. And it's not even just in a sexual way, because I will say, as the internet would tell you, this film definitely sexy, definitely steamy, a little bit horny. The audience was certainly kind of hooting and hollering and shifting in their seats, I'd say, in a good way during a lot of the film. Um, there's some moments that are totally unexpected and totally rowdy and totally like jaw dropping. And I've not been able to stop thinking about this film since I saw it. And it's certainly one that I want to watch again, because I've been listening to the soundtrack from Atticus Ross and oh gosh, why am I going to blank on their names right now? It's the Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. There we go. Bringing a little bit of their Social Network feel that they'd kind of done with that soundtrack, with these like little techno beat boop bop sounds, but then really cranking up the BPMs and giving like techno house music to go along with some really competitive looking tennis. And the tennis in the film, again, this is a movie about tennis, but as they will say in the film, often we're not really talking about tennis when we're talking about tennis. You know, Technically and physically, everybody looks great playing. There's a few moments where maybe you can tell that a professional has stepped in, but I've watched a couple featurettes with Zendaya. I've watched and listened to how much weight Feist kind of had to put on before taking on this role, just so they could get in that shape. The tennis physique is a very interesting one, and it's a sport that really demands a lot out of you physically, which was something I thought was a great kind of detail that attention was paid to. Just from moments where, at first maybe it seems ridiculous that, oh, you're switching shirts multiple times through a match. Maybe it seems excessive. You've got all these rackets, you've got all these things, but when you're playing in the 100-degree heat, sweating through, there's moments where the camera's just positioned right underneath their faces after a long set, sweat's dripping down. There's some awesome shots where you become the ball as the camera, or we're kind of looking underneath the court. Um, for being a movie about tennis, there's definitely a decent amount of it, and all of it looks really awesome. But it's everything else that kind of fuels the story leading up to what turns out to be a rematch of sorts between Patrick and Art's characters some years down the road, after all these experiences they kind of had when they were younger. It is riveting stuff. It is funny in so many moments. It's oddly sweet in so many moments too. You've got three characters who all see the world differently, all take it and approach it differently. They all have their own thoughts about tennis and how they play it, how they wanted to play it. Because, eventually Tashi ends up being Art's coach at one point, because she's no longer able to play at the level she was. And maybe Art has more potential to go further. And you look at what drives these characters, what matters to them most, how some of those things kind of conflict. It's just it's scandalous, it's scintillating, it's just filmmaking at a really high level. I had such a good time watching this movie. The script is phenomenal. The performances are terrific. Zendaya, especially after Dune Part 2, she continues to be captivating in a way that is just so fueled by emotion. And in this film, a lot of it's kind of fueled by a lack thereof sometimes, and a colder personality that is driven and focused on certain things. And if you're not aligned on that, then I don't know why we're wasting our time here. I mean, there's moments where I was like, girl, brutal. But I'm like, I haven't seen her perform like this. And I haven't seen the side of Zendaya. And it was just like awesome to finally get some moments where it's like, okay, she's a force to be reckoned with. And you start giving her a lot more vehicles like this film, she's just going to keep killing it, I think. So it was really awesome to see that. But, for my money, Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor, to me, came out of nowhere. O'Connor's coming off a film, I believe, called La Chimera. Mike Feist was in West Side Story from Steven Spielberg. I did see that film. I think I saw both films, actually. Don't remember too much about either. But I had forgotten that I guess that I had seen both of these guys. They're phenomenal. They are so terrific in the film. The friendship, the casualness and closeness they're able to convey, really terrific. It's not necessarily a relationship that they have, but there's something to be said for when two actors just have an immediate chemistry and everything just looks effortless. I'm like, these guys did grow up together. I'm like, I buy it. I believe that there is like a will they, won't they? Maybe they don't even know that tension exists. There's so many moments. There's a stool pull at one point in the film that just like in your head, you're like, oh my God, I'm like, look at, did they even know what this looks like right now? Did they know what they're doing? It's just brilliant filmmaking on every level. Just a fascinating story. Again, that soundtrack, pulse pounding. You're going to be hearing it in clubs probably this summer, and it'd be a huge letdown if the clubs were not playing it because, it's just exhilarating. I've been listening to it on the way to work, and it's like, all right, now I'm pumped. We're going to tackle the day, and it's going to be great. So I'm super looking forward to getting back to seeing this film again in theaters. You got to check it out on the big screen if you can. It's going to play great at home, but it is a theatrical experience that I think is worth having, especially with other people. I think, if anything, because like I've said with other Guadagnino films, it just kind of continues to normalize humanity and relationships and people in all our complications and all our beauties, not ever trying to box people into one thing or another. It just shows you life as it is. And so I think that lends itself to the film so well because it never just decides to say, he's this, she's that. This is the label for what their thing is called. It just never dilutes that in a good way. So I can't sing this film's praises enough. Challengers is definitely going to be on a lot of end of year lists, I can imagine, and it is certainly one of, if not the strongest entry I feel like we've had so far for 2024. So stay tuned. We're going to have we might have a few things that could creep in there. After the huge success of the Planet of the Apes trilogy from the mid 2000s, we've got Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes coming out soon. I'm pretty stoked for that. Curious to see kind of where they take that post Matt Reeves. We've got the Seattle International Film Festival starting up. Harmony Korine's got a film premiering there. There's more than a few things that have certainly piqued my interest there that I'm going to be super excited to share with y'all. And probably some interviews as well. So things are moving in a very exciting direction. And as always, thank you for tuning in. You can find us at NT Movie Reviews on all social media networks, podcast platforms, and even on YouTube. Thank you, and we'll catch you next time.